College football is back, ladies and gentlemen. It has been 288 days since Virginia Tech football last played a snap on the gridiron, but come Saturday night, the Hokies will host the Old Dominion Monarchs in a primetime matchup that Virginia Tech will certainly be seeking its revenge. Good morning, everybody. From the Moss Arts Center, I'm Nels Williams, joined alongside on the panel today by Kyle Marshak and Giovanni Heater. We'll be hearing from our reporters Will Lachlan, Robert Bateman, and Carter Hill very shortly. But guys, college football's back in Blacksburg. Not much better else than that, and it's a totally new roster this season as well, as roughly 41% of the Virginia Tech 2023 roster is new, coming from the portal or simply from recruiting. The rest of everyone else who transferred out has simply graduated or gone elsewhere in their college football careers. And Kyle, it appears that Brent Pry and company have completely overhauled the roster with a plethora of talent.
Yeah, Pry said in that Thursday presser, it's a step-by-step process to build up to that ultimate goal, which is a national championship roster. And this year was a great first step. I mean, talk about Fontel Mines recruiting alone in the receiver room, picking up Daquan Felton from Norfolk State, Jalen Lane, Middle Tennessee, and of course the guy we'll talk about plenty, Ollie Jennings from ODU. But how about the other guys too? I mean, Bashal Tutin is an FCS All-American running back. That's a guy that we really needed in the backfield. And on top of that, how about Antoine Powell-Ryland from Florida, another Portsmouth, Virginia native. So the Commonwealth recruiting was fantastic this offseason.
And they mostly kept it within the 6-hour radius that Brent Pry and company have been preaching and talking so much about as well. But Gio, shifting gears to Norfolk, Old Dominion as well has a completely new roster. How are they shaping up Saturday night?
Yeah, you got a situation here where you had two teams that didn't really have the seasons they wanted. Both teams, Virginia Tech and Old Dominion, only won 3 games in 2022. With that, in the new era of college football, you're going to have roster turnover. The Monarchs did just that. Old Dominion's 58 newcomers are the 7th most of any FBS team in the country, and 41 scholarship newcomers is also 7th most in the nation. The Monarchs are tied with New Mexico with just 6 seniors, guys. 6 seniors for the Monarchs. That is the fewest in the country. And of the 41 players that they did return, ODU has 150 total combined starts, the 6th fewest of anybody in all of college football. So you just have a lot of young, inexperienced talent for both teams, really.
And not only that, but they had a program record 3 players be drafted to the NFL, as well as players transfer out, including, how can you not talk about him, wide receiver Ollie Jennings. Jennings was a 2022 first-team All-Sun Belt selection. He averaged 106.6 yards a game in receiving. That's 3rd best in the nation. How much of an impact will Jennings have on a wide receiver room that, last year was not as good, per se, as this year?
Well, I think that he can have a tremendous impact for Virginia Tech. And, Nels, we were talking about it before the show even started, the fact that Virginia Tech hadn't had a 1,000-yard receiving season since Isaiah Ford in 2015 and 2016.
Right.
Well, that is also the only time Virginia Tech ever had a 1,000-yard receiver. A couple of guys came close. Cam Phillips in 2017 was one big play away with 964 yards. Then before that, you had a couple of big seasons throughout, a couple of 900-yard seasons, 4 to be exact. Marcus Davis was pretty good for Virginia Tech back in 2012. And before that, you got to go to Andre Davis in 1999. Plain and simple, wide receiver hasn't really been a position for Virginia Tech where somebody jumps off the box score. Obviously, they've had a lot of talent. Maybe Ollie Jennings can kind of change that trajectory. We had him in a Triumph Spotlight earlier this year, and he looked right into the camera and said, I'm going for Isaiah Ford's single-season receiving record. I only get 1 year to do it here at Tech. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, and on top of that, we spoke with Daquan Felton too, and the confidence is just glaring in the wide receiver room right now. I love it. It feels like just a reimagined offense with what they did in terms of bringing tools in. But in terms of Ollie Jennings specifically, I got one stat for you. He had 9 touchdowns last year. The most touchdowns by a Hokies receiver last year for Virginia Tech, 3, Caleb Smith. Big difference.
Well, Ollie Jennings looks to rejuvenate this wide receiver room as well as other transfers as well. You can say that it's the murderer's row and probably the most stacked receiving core, or rather group, on the Virginia Tech offense. But for more on Ollie Jennings, here's Will Lachlan with a great feature.
It didn't take long for Virginia Tech to become familiar with 4-year wide receiver Ollie Jennings. After all, a year ago, the Richmond native torched the Hokies as a Monarch for 122 receiving yards on 5 catches, 3 of which were 20-plus yard chunk plays in the 4th quarter that helped Old Dominion snatch that upset victory over Brent Pry in his first game as the Hokies head coach. Now, both the Monarchs and the Hokies suffered similar fates in the long run, only winning 3 games last fall and ending their season well short of bowl eligibility. Jennings, however, was stellar all season long, coming 61 yards shy of his second 1,000-yard season of his career. Now, following his 4th season at the collegiate ranks, Jennings opted to count his blessings and enter the transfer portal for a 5th season. And it just so happened that Coach Pry was looking for a playmaker to boost the Hokies' offense and create more explosive plays down the field. Jennings fit that bill to a T, and it didn't take long for Pry to show Jennings the greener grass of Lane Stadium on the other side of the Commonwealth. Now, in the 8 months since Jennings has become a Hokie, he's turned the heads of the Tech coaching staff and earned the respect of his teammates as a leader. As of now, he projects to be the top option for Grant Wells and a deeper and more talented wide receiver room than last year. Of course, Week 1 may also come with a fair share of jitters for Jennings, given the fact that the Hokies will host his former team in Old Dominion in Week 1. And it's a dynamic that can't be ignored, but Jennings stated a feeling of excitement towards the challenge in game week presser. Take a listen.
I would say it's kind of more exciting to finally be back in season rather than facing my old team. I know it's going to be a little weird because I was with them for so long. Now I'm on playing on the opposite side of them. So I could say it's going to be a little weird. I talked to Deej and Coach Greg about it because they got to experience it last year. But, I mean, I'm really excited just to be playing another game. I know last year didn't end well for me, so I'm excited to finally be back out there.
Now look, at the end of the day, football is just football. And while there will be plenty of familiar faces on the opposing sideline for Jennings, he'll just have to use that chip on his shoulder to make a huge impact in his first game as a Hokie and for the rest of the season.
Fantastic work as always, Will. Now, guys, let's turn over to Virginia Tech. Last season was a disappointment, to say the least. 3-8 doesn't cut it. Was one of their worst records and worst finishes in nearly 30 years. But as we mentioned before, new team, whole lot of new talent on the roster, but there's still the same quarterback in Grant Wells. Wells last season was not what the Hokies expected, transferring out of Marshall. What does Grant Wells need to do, and how much of an impact will he have on this team if he succeeds this season?
I think everyone's got to take a deep breath a little bit. You got to realize the offensive line was definitely a strugglesome position group last year for Virginia Tech, and really didn't have weapons to distribute the ball to. You had Caleb Smith. That's pretty much it for Grant Wells. It's really, really hard to be a good college football quarterback without weapons to, distribute the ball to. Now he has that. They went to work in the transfer portal. They brought in a running back that can really receive the ball and run the ball very, very well in Bashaw too, and Malachi Thomas can do that as well. Of course, they absolutely loaded the receiving room as well, which we will continue to get into throughout the show, but I think everyone's just got to take a deep breath. What I'm really curious to see, though, is, they say they're going to do this whole 2-quarterback thing. They have said they have packages installed for Kyron Drones to play. What is that going to look like on Saturday is my biggest question. Are we going to see him come in and, short distance third down situations? Is he going to come in to really run the football only? They've said he has such an athletic build. He has a completely different skill set from Grant Wells. I'm just very curious to see what this 2-quarterback system, so to speak, really is going to look like.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you talk about a 2-quarterback system. You and I joke about it all year. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback, right? And that's the age-old adage, right? But that's the concern. So we'll have to just wait and see.
Yeah, Kyron Drones brought in more as kind of a competition to ruffle Wells' feathers, but he won the quarterback battle, and he also said that this wide receiver room was one of the best he's played with, and he can't stop speaking about it. But for Wells to be successful, the entire team has to be successful. Kyle and Gio will go Kyle, then Gio. What are the keys to success for Virginia Tech to come out on top of against the Monarchs Saturday night?
Well, we just said it. You can have an unfair projection on a quarterback if he doesn't have an O-line and he doesn't have receivers. He didn't have either. He had Caleb Smith and a really struggling O-line last year. I mean, my guy was getting smoked in the pocket. He felt the pressure against ODU alone. I mean, he got sacked twice versus ODU, and he turned over the ball 5 times. So first key, protect the quarterback. I mean, you got to protect the guy. He felt the pressure all year long in the pocket, and with that, win the turnover battle too. I mean, 5 turnovers is just not going to do it.
Yeah, 5 turnovers as a team, 4 interceptions for Grant Wells. Just a situation where ODU simply doesn't win that game. Like, somehow, despite 5 turnovers as a team, 4 interceptions, all the chaos that happened with that snap that went all the way back and they returned it for a touchdown, Virginia Tech only loses that game by 3. Like, really, Old Dominion had no business winning that game. Tech, in a lot of ways, kind of handed it to them. I think if you're able to do those 2 things, you're in really, really good shape. And I think the other thing is get after the other quarterback. Grant Wilson, he threw 5 passes last year, and he did it at Fordham. 70,000 people in a rockin' Lane Stadium, sold-out atmosphere on a Saturday night. It's a little different. It's a little different, and good luck to you.
The odds are certainly aligning for Virginia Tech to stomp on Old Dominion Saturday night. But you're right. Last time they played, it seemed like Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. But for more on Virginia Tech and for the rest of this season, here's Carter Hill. He's got you covered.
Progress. That's the one thing Virginia Tech fans want to see from Brent Pry's program in the Tech head man's second year at the helm. A once potent powerhouse within the confines of the Atlantic Coast Conference still remains a sleeping giant to this day. And although it still remains not too long ago Tech saw themselves as a perennial contender on the national stage, it's starting to get to the point where 8 consecutive 10-win seasons, multiple BCS Bowl appearances, and 4 ACC championships have become quite the afterthought. And it's really hard to argue why. After just a 3-win season in 2022 with roster flaws from top to bottom on the worst Tech team the school has seen in 30 years, it's now Pry's responsibility to rejuvenate a fan base that remains starved for success. And this is a very important season in that stepping stone. A win over Old Dominion is a must. Though the Hokies have had their struggles with the Monarchs in Norfolk, Lane Stadium never seemed to have failed the Maroon and Orange when ODU comes to town. And if that progress really is slated to be shown, it's got to start under the bright lights that will shine down on Worsham Field on Saturday night. Tech has the tools to be successful too. Led by 3-year starter Grant Wells as the Hokies starting signal caller, there's much more to work with on the offensive side of the ball. Try adding former ODU receiver Ollie Jennings to the mix. That will certainly help out the cause. How about the additions of Middle Tennessee transfer Jalen Lane and former Norfolk State Spartan Quan Felton to the receiving corps for Virginia Tech? Should be 2 noteworthy additions. Bayshaw Tootin in the backfield isn't a slouch either. I mean, the guy was a former FCS All-American. Come on. Antoine Powell-Ryland on the defensive front, Derek Canteen in the secondary, you name it. This Hokies team is much improved from a season ago, and there's no reason why progress couldn't be made starting Saturday night.
Fantastic work as always, Carter. Now, guys, it's pretty simple. The odds are stacked against Old Dominion on Saturday night. It's a tall task. What do they have to do to come out on top against the Hokies?
Well, it is a very tall task. And honestly, I don't know if they will. But you got to start somewhere, right? I think it starts with really, really helping your quarterback in every way possible. I mean, we mentioned it through just 5 passes at Fordham last year. Now he's got to come play in front of a sold-out Lane Stadium, one of the cathedrals of college football. I mean, keep the play calling simple. Keep the communication simple. The offensive line has to keep him on his feet. And, you know, his receivers and tight ends, they have to help him out. That's the biggest thing. And then you go to the defensive side. The defense needs to help out the quarterback. The good thing for Old Dominion is the fact that Virginia Tech never scored more than 29 points last year. They never reached 30 last year in 2022. Yeah. We saw it last year in Norfolk. We saw it against Georgia Tech for Virginia Tech in Lane Stadium last year as well, where a team stayed pesky, kept this thing close, and then all of a sudden, Georgia Tech came back down 11. They beat the Hokies at the end of that ball game. Same thing with Old Dominion, 20-17. They ended up taking down the Hokies in week 1. So, you know, if Old Dominion can keep this thing close, crazy things happen on a Saturday night for college football.
Yeah, 100%. I can't help but agree. And with that being said, too, there's another odd that stacks against them. Neither team has beat each other on the road when visiting one another in this all-time series. So for me, when I look at the way the Hokies played last year, we know offensively ODU can't function the way the Hokies did with just one receiver. And that one receiver for them right now with at least halfway decent numbers on the roster is Javon Harvey, who had 558 yards last year, which is still decent but middle of the pack at best, right? With that being said, I mean, Jordan Bly and Isaiah Page, if I'm Ronnie, I'm saying you guys got to step up and give some support on offense.
Yeah, not only that, you mentioned, got to baby the quarterback, keep it simple. Grant Wilson has only thrown 5 passes at an FCS level at Fordham, transfers to the FBS. Imagine that your first task in FBS football is in Lane Stadium, the Terror Dome of all places. That's a tall task. That's certainly a tall task. Yeah. What does he have to do? You got to keep it in the game.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where he's just got to, stay composed, slow down his heartbeat. It's really interesting. I was listening to an interview with, baseball phenom Dylan Cruz, just won a national championship at LSU, arguably one of the best players to come out of college baseball in a long time, right? He's already skyrocketed through the minor leagues. I believe he's in AA right now. Anyhow, getting away from that. He talked about how important it was to every at-bat slow down his heartbeat. He has a breathing routine. He's played in some big moments on some really, really big stages. I think that's exactly what Grant Wilson and really everybody need to do tomorrow night because there's a lot of pressure for the Hokies too. Grant Wells, he has a lot of pressure on his back, things like that. Everyone's got to take a deep breath tomorrow.
Yeah, there are two factors that go into it. If you have experience playing in an environment like that, you'll be a little bit calmer. And two, if you just have the innate ability to slow down your heartbeat. Both are unanswered, and the odds are stacked against it. So we'll just have to wait and see, right?
Well, like Ariana Grande says, you just got to keep breathing, breathing, breathing. But for more on the Monarchs, here's Robert Bateman with the report.
Oh, do you believe it? College football is back in the state of Virginia, and the Old Dominion Monarchs are ready to kick things off the exact same way they started last season with a matchup against the Virginia Tech Hokies. Last year, the Monarchs hosted the Hokies for their first game of the year, and it's safe to say they protected their turf. ODU would create 5 turnovers throughout the game, including a massive late-game interception to seal their victory 20-17. This season opener upset would help push Old Dominion into a 3-3 start to the season. However, disaster struck for the Lions as they went on to lose their next 6 games to close out the year. But that's enough about 2022. Let's take a look at the Monarch squad for the 2023 season. This year, ODU has set a precedent in trusting their youth. They have added 58 newcomers to their roster, which places them at 7th most of any FBS team in the country. On top of that, out of their 41 returners, they have combined 150 total starts, which is the 6th fewest in the nation. And the change doesn't end there either. With Grant Wilson set to start at QB for the Monarchs Saturday, this marks the 9th straight year where a different quarterback will start the campaign for Old Dominion. This streak dates all the way back to 2014 when Taylor Heineke was given the reign for the Monarchs. It's not all new faces for the boys in blue, however, as defensive star Jason Henderson makes his return to the gridiron, looking to chase similar numbers to what he had last year, as he led the country in tackles with 186, just 7 tackles shy of tying the all-time record. Henderson recorded a whopping 11 double-digit tackle games and was also the only player in the country to record multiple 20-plus tackle outings. Another returning face is Javon Harvey at wide receiver. Last season, he posted 30 catches for 553 yards and 4 touchdowns. And with the loss of Ollie Jennings for the Monarchs, Harvey has been slated as the wide receiver 1. Be sure to tune in at 8 p.m. this Saturday, September 2nd, as the Monarchs are ready to wear their crown again and look to upset the Virginia Tech Hokies inside Lane Stadium.
Thanks, Rob. Now, guys, looking around the ACC this weekend, there's certainly a lot of intriguing matchups on the football gridiron outside of Blacksburg. What will you guys be watching this weekend?
Oh, number 21 UNC versus Shane Beamer's South Carolina in Charlotte, Pack Stadium. It's the number 3 projected ACC squad versus the number 3 projected SEC squad. And in the world of conferences now in NCAA, I think this could be some big implications.
Yeah, that's where College Game Day is going as well for ESPN. That one's definitely going to be exciting. I can't wait to see what Drake May can do this year. And then on the other side, Shane Beamer has a lot of buzz around that South Carolina program. I got Duke and Clemson for mine. That's a Monday night battle. That's down in Durham. Duke gets to play host to Clemson. You know, what Mike Elko was able to do, really revolutionizing the program for the Blue Devils a year ago. They won 9 ball games, got a very talented quarterback in Riley Leonard. And then on the other side, Cade Klubnik, an opportunity to really prove himself with the Tigers, ranked 9th in the country, trying to prove, hey, we can get back to that whole college football playoff contending conversation. Really, really big one to start the ACC schedule for both teams on Monday night.
Yeah, Monday Night Football is going to be a party between Clemson and Duke. But speaking of the ACC, we have 3 newcomers as of today. SMU, Cal, and Stanford, not on the Atlantic coast, but they're joining the conference. What are your guys' initial thoughts to them joining the league?
It's a dynastic thing. You see the SEC add teams from Texas. You see the Big Ten and Big 12 go global, it feels, right? So that last Power 4, but Power 5 conference that we're waiting to see grow is the ACC. So it's about time that they made that move, and I think it looks really good.
See, I'm kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. Now, I think it was inevitable. It had to happen. I don't love it, right? You know, it kind of takes the whole Atlantic Coast part out of the Atlantic Coast Conference, which is such a historic league. And a lot of people had, kind of gripes with the initial expansion a couple of years ago when you added Syracuse and Boston College. And it just wasn't the same historic feel that it had in the past. Now you add Cal and Stanford. I think academically, those are great institutions. The one I don't really understand, because they fit the mold, right? Those are 2 Power 5 teams. I don't really understand the SMU. I mean, the idea is to put a footprint in the state of Texas. Obviously, football is absolutely huge there. SMU is good in a lot of other sports, but I just don't necessarily understand how SMU fits into the mold. Stadium size very similar to Duke and Wake Forest, around 30 to 35,000 people. It just doesn't have the Power 5 feel, but hey, this is the direction we're going in college football these days.
Yeah, you just kind of have to accept it, that conference realignment is a thing, and you got to take what you can get. But I just feel terrible for Washington State and Oregon State. Two
Yeah.
wonderful programs, great fan bases, really, really rowdy, tough environment, right? And they're kind of left behind in the dust. So welcome to the ACC, Cal, Stanford, and SMU. It'll be fun to travel to Texas or California, right?
I'd love to.
But let's bring it back into Blacksburg, folks, all right? Saturday night, prime time, ACC Network, Enter Salmon's going to be rocking. What are you guys' predictions? I know, I'm so excited.
I know, I can't
What
wait.
are you guys' predictions for the game? You know, how do you think the game's going to flow? Any players you think that are going to stand out?
I can't sleep, man. I'm excited. I think with the assets that you add on offense, this is Grant Wells night. Straightforward.
Yeah. Prediction? What's your final score take?
Man, you know, we saw low scoring-ish matchup, and it's an offense that's new. So I'm going to say that the defense takes control, and the Hokies will win 21-14. Middle of the
Oh, a little
pack scoring.
closer, a little closer
Yeah,
than
yeah.
the sports books are predicting.
Okay.
Gio?
I think the Hokies, in a lot of ways, have to really put an exclamation point on this game. Doesn't mean that they will necessarily, but I think, you know, after those guys losing last year, Ollie Jennings get to play against his old team. I think Virginia Tech really could feel good coming out of Saturday if you really laid it on ODU. For that reason, I say they get over the 30-point mark, which is a milestone, considering they didn't do it last year. I'm going to say Tech wins it. We'll go 35-10 is my final prediction.
You know, I was going to say 35-6 actually, and but the 6 points was not going to be a touchdown and missed extra point. It was going to be
Pair of field goals.
two pairs of field goals, right? But I agree. I think they're going to eclipse the 30 points mark. It's going to be massive, right? And I think the first play of the game, Ollie Jennings go route, Grant Wells touchdown. I'm calling it. I think they're going to come out. They're going to come out strong. They know, listen, we got this guy. We've been talking about him all offseason against the former team too. Why not sprinkle a little magic on there and get Lane Stadium rocking?
Would collapse.
Yeah. Did you see that Utah did that last night? First play of the game against Florida. They threw a deep ball and ended up scoring 75 yards to the house on the first play. So
It's in the air.
Why not?
I mean, why not? You know, you got 2 more downs for a reason, right before 4th down. But hey, these two will have the call for 3304 Sports. Giovanni Heater and Kyle Marshak, excellent on the panel as always. Special thank you to Robert Bateman, Will Loughlin, and Carter Hill for providing the wonderful reports as always. That'll do it here from the Moss Art Center. Thank you again, gentlemen. I'm Nels Williams. We'll see you next week for 3304 kickoff against Purdue. Have a great rest of your night, everybody.